Good evening. Welcome to the Cooper-Hewitt National Design Museum. My name is Erin McCluskey. I'm the Public Education Manager here at the museum. And tonight's program is part of a series of programs that we're bringing you in connection with the Wall Stories exhibition upstairs on our top floor. It's up through April 5th. So if you didn't have a chance to see it tonight before this program, we hope you come back and visit us again with your friends and family. And also on Saturday, February 28th, we have another program related to the exhibition that will be a wallpaper demonstration and talk with designers, kind of taking you through the steps of wallpaper from design through production and then into incorporation in a room, which should be a great program as well. And all of that can be found on our website, cooperhewitt.org, as well as other upcoming programs for families and adults, so definitely check that out. So tonight, I'm very pleased to welcome Kiera Coffey, home editor of Cookie magazine, who has put together a wonderful group of designers and even a resident of an imaginative and innovative space for kids. Cookie magazine has been a great collaborator for this exhibition, and we are very happy to be bringing the pages of Cookie alive tonight. So with that, I'd like to welcome Kiera.
Hey, everyone. Well, thanks to Erin for inviting us here. We're really excited to be here. I have some great designers to speak with you, and Satchel, who's 9 years old, so we hear an actual kid's perspective. I have been at Cookie from the beginning about 3 years ago, and I'm the home editor, so I oversee all the pages that deal with interior design and home products, toys, and real family homes. So I help choose those, and I work with a lot of great designers, as well as create some of the spaces myself. The show upstairs is really great, and we were really taken with it at Cookie. So we created a room, a whole article inspired by the show, which I'll show you a little bit of later, what we did. But you should definitely look at it. It's really beautiful. I think I can speak for all the designers here tonight in saying I really feel lucky designing for kids' spaces because it's a whole different thing. Adults approach it differently. Kids obviously approach spaces differently. And I love so many things about the way kids think about things, like lack of division between things sometimes at certain ages, possibilities, and just a lot of creative thinking. And I feel like it's really enhanced my take on design, which I didn't always work with kids, so it's really been fun for me. And I think you see that in all the designers' work here, that there's a real pleasure in looking through the kids' perspective when designing. So before I worked with Cookie, I worked for a lot of adult interior design magazines. I helped start up Nest, and I contributed to Martha Stewart Living and Interiors, and I'm still obviously really interested in adult design as well, but I started to really get pulled down by the importance of the provenance of everything, and a real focus on who designed it, where it sits, what it does, how important it is. And when I moved to Cookie, it was such a breath of fresh air because suddenly we weren't talking about just the pieces and the designers, but the conversation when you talk about a kid's space is really more about the kid and interaction with the pieces. It's not so much the piece itself, its provenance or what it's about, but how the family interacts with it, how the kid interacts with it. And I found that just a total breath of fresh air, and it's changed how I think about design. I'm really inspired again. So, with that, I will tell you, one of the things, a perfect example of one of the things I like about the way kids think about spaces is we do a lot of articles that are a kid's room, and then we do a question and answer with the child, and we often ask the kid, if you could change anything about your room, what would you change? And it's just a little cute answer, but it's so indicative of the way kids think, and it sort of made me remember what I was doing. We asked this boy, who you'll see later in my slides, Caleb, what he would change, and he said, I would turn my room into a donut and eat it. and it was great because, kids don't make that division often between, the actual space versus some fantasy that has nothing to do with the room. So, that kind of thing I find really refreshing, and it sounds like an odd thing, but I try and work that perspective into my work, and I think we all do. So, I think a lot of kid spaces that I've seen, I get to see a lot of kid spaces over the course of my Cookie work, and it's a funny thing because you start out designing a nursery and your kid isn't born, and so the room has nothing to do with the child's personality, and it's really not always a kid-friendly environment. I mean, it's safe and the plugs are plugged up, but it's often not about the child at all. So I think past that stage, you start getting into the real interaction between kids and adults, and hopefully parents will start taking the cue that they should involve their children. But I'm going to start, the slides, I'm going to start with a nursery that we did. Okay, so first I should explain something, right, pattern. I've noticed in looking at my work that I kind of work with about 4 major elements: pattern, color, scale, and what I'll call magic, which I'll sort of explain later. And the first thing in pattern is based on a wallpaper that is in the show that you'll see later. This is the 1968 Alice in Wonderland wallpaper by John Rombola, which is beautifully on display upstairs. I was really inspired by the color and the sort of freestyle hand of it. It's not, measured grid like many of the wallpapers at that time. It's a great subject, Alice in Wonderland. And so Cookie decided to make a room based on this, which I'll have to explain a little bit of. So what I did was we had to find a wallpaper that people could buy now that would somehow reference the wallpaper that we're talking about. So this is obviously very colorful and sort of psychedelic. We chose this wallpaper with a fine line because it's hand-drawn and it has some of the whimsy of that. But really, the room shows its color and its sort of 60s palette in everything else. So this room falls most strongly in the pattern category that I'm talking about. And what I feel like is important here is that the small pattern of the wallpaper, it sort of acts as a ground. So that you have this tiny pattern, it acts as a ground, which means that it stands separate from all the other really bold color and pattern everywhere else, like in the pillows and on the rug and in the artwork. And I think that one of the key things that this did, that this does, which I've sort of repeated in Cookie again and again, is that when you have 2 strong patterns working against each other, they sort of, sorry, I'm getting a little tongue-tied. All of the bold stuff unifies together against this finer background. And one thing that's good for in space like this is if there's a lot of colorful kids' toys and stuff and effluvia that you don't really want to be looking at all the time, it kind of subdues it a little bit because it starts to unify. So, and then I also felt like in the content, having this Angela Davis poster up, I thought I'd bring the 60s sort of back into this room that way, as well as with some Peter Max posters. This is another bold use of pattern, which kind of does the same thing. The really bold red of the pattern and the strong graphic element of it. With the bed, it sort of makes such a unified force that the toys and all of the stuff elsewhere, it belittles it a little bit, which is really nice when your kid's making a huge mess. So this room is really tidy for our photo shoot, but this is, I feel like it's a good trick to know for parents. I also think that I started, let's see if I can use this pointer. I don't know if you can see it, but here's a tiny little ladder. Can you guys see that? There's a tiny toy ladder that climbs up the frame. And I just wanted to point out that I try and bring a sort of change in scale into most of the rooms that I design. It's something that kids really already do and like, and so I kind of include that for just some fun. And then I think the disco ball here, which it doesn't reproduce so well here, but do you see the sunlight dots on the ceiling? I'm going to call that magic for now, because there's this category that I kept thinking about before coming tonight, and I couldn't quite figure out what to call it because it's just about magic, and it's kind of like whatever sort of opens that door for kids. So it could be a change of context, it could be a change in scale. In this case, when you're in this room and the sun is bouncing off of that disco ball, it's sort of magical. It's just hard to describe. So I really think that all the designers tonight and myself include this, and it's kind of a key thing, and you can't always describe it exactly, but I'll keep going. You'll see more of this. This is another pattern on pattern situation where the wallpaper was this really kind of traditional wallpaper, not something you would normally pair with a black and white theme, but that's what I tried to do. So all the black and white you see down below is, again, kind of unifying against the contrast of the wallpaper. And I think, the biggest compliment to me was someone looked at this and said, if you didn't have that wallpaper, it would be a nice room, but it wouldn't be inspiring at all. And I thought that, to me, that meant that I was really successful because one thing elevates the other. Let's see. This is really, in this room, I think the pattern's kind of all over in every bit, but This is really a lot about color as well. I tried to think about working on a kid's room that was pink because there are so many girls that like pink. And I hear from a lot of adults that they don't like pink and they don't want their daughter to have this kind of room, and then, it's this war that goes on. And so I started thinking about how you could approach this in a way that everybody would be happy. So I tried to work with, so now I've done this a couple of times, and I realized it's not the color that's so bad for parents, it's the particular hue. So, whereas maybe this baby princess pink is not palatable for the adult, usually the parent and the adult can agree on another kind of pink. And so here we worked with like a real magenta, which is not, it's not reproducing exactly right, but it's really a hot magenta. So, it started with the acorn pattern, which we painted on the walls, and you can sort of see it dotted everywhere. So I definitely encourage parents to work with their kids with the particular hue, because I've heard too many say like, oh, I had to paint it this disgusting purple, and that's all he wanted. So we've sort of, at least at Cookie, been able to figure out a way around that. And I think I didn't do too much with scale in this particular shot, but I thought this would be fun to work with bookcases. It's hard to see, and make them a dollhouse. So that became fun, sort of a little bit of magic thrown in. And then this is obviously a room where we wallpapered the walls with an actual old book. This was a favorite book of a child's, and it was falling apart. And so for this story, we covered it on a wall. And I think it was pretty special because, if it's a favorite book, it really, the kid can go to sleep reading it. But also we tried to really work the black and white element together so that with the rug, a few of the things in the room, so that it wasn't too busy. And actually upstairs you'll see, I don't know if you've seen the show, but there's a great cartoon, a Mickey Mouse cartoon, also wallpapered along the wall, and it sort of has the same effect. It starts to blur and become one thing, which I thought this did that nicely, so it wasn't overwhelming in the room. And then this also, I think there's something magical for a kid to see a book kind of come to life, to become something other than just a book. When my nephew, who's now 13, was about 3 or 4, he had this favorite book, and I can't remember the name of it. I've been trying all week, but it was about these African-American family, and they would wear really traditional African-American or African clothing with really bold pattern, the head wrap and the long kaftan. And he would read this book repeatedly. And one day we went out on the street, and he saw a woman dressed like this, an African woman on the street in Brooklyn. And I'm so glad I saw his face, because he went, and he pointed at her and he said, that's, I can't remember the character's name, but he said, that's her. And, for a moment, he really, the book had come to life for him, absolutely. And I remembered how that is as a kid. For a minute, you think that, or for a long time, you think that can happen. And, quickly he realized, oh, wait, that's not exactly her, and right, that was a book. But, so this sort of was a nod to a little bit of that wonder in books and the ability of kids to sort of let things go from one realm to the other. The other thing, though, about magic that I'm always reminded of is that it's really different for everyone. So I think it's kind of a cultural thing, and it's also a personal thing. What's magical to one kid is obviously not magical to another. I was lucky enough at some point to interview a number of circus families who travel with the circus. Like, they travel something like, 48 weeks a year, a tremendous amount, and they have kids with them. A lot of them travel with kids. And so I was interviewing one of the moms, and she was telling me about this really unusual life. She was pregnant with each of her kids. She has 3, and with each of them she'd have to go to a different doctor in every city, because she was never, throughout her pregnancy, she was never in the same city. Just things you can't imagine. And the kids, to an ordinary kid, have a really magical life. They do their homework in the dressing room. Their mom shoots their dad out of a cannon, literally. It's this really crazy magical life. And to them, though, the thing that these kids wanted more than anything, they learn to juggle, they learn to do, their tutors are the circus performers, so it's a pretty outstanding childhood. But what they wanted were soccer teams and baseball teams. They wanted team sports, because to them that was really magical, and they never could do it. They didn't have enough kids, they didn't ever have a space like that, there was no coach, they just weren't able to have team sports. So I try to remind myself that magic is really different to everyone. That's a really unusual situation, but still, I think it's important to pay attention. All right, what else have we got? Scale, moving on to scale. So this is a room that I worked on. There's something perfect about having Godzilla on your wall. First of all, Godzilla's supposed to be big and looming. So this was a photograph that we shot at Cookie and then had made into wallpaper. So this was for my nephew's room, and he's very, he's not excited by a lot, let's say. So, I said, well, what do you want on your wall? And he's like, I don't know. But I knew it had to be something sort of ghoulish, but also something that his mother could stand. So this was sort of a fun idea because, Godzilla's really big, but he's also really harmless. And there's something about this large-scale figure that when you come into this room, which is really not very big, it's sort of overpowering in a really fun way. So that was super fun. This, this could easily be called pattern, more about pattern, but I think the magic of this is actually the scale. The sort of plume of library books behind this very small toddler's chair sort of works on a great scale level, and then these tiny Polaroid photographs down at the bottom. This was a challenge just to create a really great kid space in a apartment that just didn't have any room for it. So it's truly just this tiny little wall, but I think the proof was as soon as we put it up, the kid was instantly there. Playing, and it's just maybe 3 feet wide. So that was really fun, and you could sort of see the kid looking up at it and really having a great time with it. So I knew that was a success. And again, this sort of speaks of scale because framing something like this, you get the sense that the giraffe is sort of too big for one frame. So although it's not that big itself, it gives the impression of being much larger and looming. And then, of course, the pattern of it brings a pattern onto the wall. And color. So I think that people in general are a little bit nervous of bold colors all across the room, and I think they're definitely more free with kid spaces. People feel like they can play a little bit with their kid space. It's not as serious. Kids beg for it, so sometimes they do it more. But I'd like to sort of encourage people to go even farther, and this was actually black. This was a black room with a darker black trim. And the nice thing about black, or even white, which I'll show you, is that it's sort of like tailoring. It makes things sort of really smart, or like putting something in like a mediocre photograph in a really great frame. The way that makes that photograph look so much better. I feel like black brings out everything else around it, or any really dark or light hue. So things really pop, not just color, but shape. So you can see things suddenly that look really clean and defined, and I really like that about using dark colors. You have to have windows so that you have daylight so that you don't want to, kill yourself. But no, really, it does work successfully over and over again, and it's just people are shy away from it. So I encourage people to try it out. That also happened to be a very goth girl, so she liked it. And so here's the opposite. So here's this. We did an article on white, and it wasn't about using white so much because everyone does that, but this happened to be about how to get crayon marks off of your white. So that's how we approached it. So there are a lot of unusual materials here, but I think it speaks to the same idea where everything else aside from the white is really popping. It's really coming at you, and it's defined and really quite beautiful. And there are ways to do it for kids where you don't have to clean it up all the time. This is an idea, I used color here more like wall art, and this is an idea I had about a space that you don't spend a ton of time in, or a space that you haven't quite gotten the right wall art for, or that you haven't, that you sort of walk through but don't live in all the time. So if you don't want to commit to a giant wall of color or a pattern like this that's going to take over a room, you really can do a small space. So this was just the hallway right kind of near the front door. And it really sort of brought it together. Okay, this is the fun part, I think. So we do a lot of stories at Cookie that are about really small, helpful things for parents. And one of the things that we were talking about were the tendency for kids to collect things, and so, kids just amass stuff. It can be anything. It can be like Pop Tops or rocks or, anything, but it becomes massive, and what do you do with it? So we came up with a bunch of solutions for various collections that kids had amassed, and in doing this one, which I thought was so simple, my niece, this was my niece's part of her animal collection, this was magical for her. This was that look that like, something about all we did was we put this dollhouse barnyard fencing on the shelf, and it became not just her collection of animals, which she plays with all the time, but it became a barnyard. So she was very excited, had to make all of her shelves that way, much to my sister's dismay. But there was something really real about bringing something to life here that hadn't existed before. And I just sort of came upon it. I didn't think it would be as magical as it was, and so I encourage people to really just play a bit. And then also this is such a nice black and white pattern too, that I think that something about the tidiness of it all really is appealing. This was from that same article, and this is a feather collection, which we thought about long and hard. The thing about collections for kids is they want to actually play with the stuff, so you can't put it away. But you don't necessarily want to see it all laid out entirely over the carpet. So this was a solution that I feel like we hit a nice note on, because it sort of became a cross between like a headdress and a costume, and a nest. So all of these things being great things in kids' minds. So this child was very happy about it, and of course you can keep adding to it, but it was really fun. I think someone should write a chapter in a book about how much kids like any kind of curtain. A curtain, a tent, any sort of separate cloth area. This idea came from a family in Virginia, I think, and it was just, first of all, it was a really nice, smart solution to an unused, a non-functioning fireplace. So they didn't have anything to do with this space, but I thought, okay, one step is to go and put your kids' toys in it, which is great, but the curtain just did it, I think. And so we recreated it for this family, and it was a huge success. There's something, I don't know, maybe someone will figure out someday what it is about curtains that kids like. Okay, so now we're moving on to the idea of bringing outdoor things in. I think we all, for adults and kids, I think we know that outdoors are inspiring and wondrous, and there's all kinds of things that everyone likes about it. But I think it's especially fun to bring, and this is that change of context thing, to bring indoor things outdoors. So we did a story on camping in your own backyard, and the advantage of that is that you can bring your things outside. But even if you're elsewhere, I think there's something really fun about seeing something that's always inside be outside. And so here we have, let's see if I can make the pointer work. I'll show you other pictures, but this is a bird cage and a trunk. These are stools, they might be indoor or outdoor, but we actually have a bed in here, a real bedding. So I think I have a better picture. Well, this is the same tent, but this is a little tea party. But so you can see, this is really from the house, and kids really get a kick out of it, and it really makes it sort of special. I'm not sure, again, that I could analyze that entirely, and this is another of our lovely tent scenarios. So this is for a kid who's really interested in like botany and studying all of this stuff about plants and bugs, and so we set up a little laboratory there, and just brought regular blankets outside, which, even though sleeping bags are really fun for kids, it's really cool to see, the context change. I know a little girl who really got a kick out of eating dinner in her swim goggles for a while, and it's just because it was a different context, and she really got a kick out of it. So playing with that is really a fun thing. And this is another one. You'll see when I get closer that we have some unusual things in there. Well, first we have, sorry, let me go back for a second. We brought some stuffed animals out, which has worked really nicely, and then. This tent was filled with sort of technologically advanced things. So this is a little iKaraoke that you have. And nowadays, a lot of the inflatable mattresses have plug-ins for iPods and fans and radios and all kinds of things like that. So there is a way to get kid, especially the child who's really into just playing video games or doing all the stuff that's plugged in, you can get them outside. So this was, I think there's one more shot of, oh wait, no, okay, let me go back. There's a couple of different things we have in this, but this is the only picture I have. And it's a way to maybe get that child who doesn't like the outdoors out there and playing with stuff. Okay, so now I will show you some of the real homes we've published that sort of exemplify a lot of what I'm talking about. This is a fabulous room designed by Stefan Boublil, and this is his son Zoe. I think there's a lot you could talk about here. There's a lot about pattern here, but I think for me the biggest thing is scale. So this giant pattern on the wallpaper is fabulous, but also if you look closely, his bed is double length. So it's a sort of simple thing, but it's really special when you see this super long bed and the kid can jump from one side to the other. It's not just for sleepovers, he sleeps on both sides. You know, there's something really great about that. Not to mention it's a great pose. This is from a house in London that we published recently, and I just couldn't believe that no one had thought of this before. You know, it's one of those ideas that's so perfect, and you think, God, I can't believe I never saw that before. The architect is the dad of this family, and this was for his home, and I mean, you almost don't have to talk about it. It's such a natural idea, right? I mean, we all get it. And apparently all their friends like to come over to their house. We're actually working on, at Cookie, we're working on a story that's about that house, which is that house that kids really like to go to. You know, in every group or neighborhood, there's that house. So I think this is really that house for many reasons, but this for sure. And I don't know, I'm sorry, I'm obsessed with that house right now because I'm working on that story. I think a lot of it is some cool thing like that, but a lot of it is also a vibe, you know, being allowed to do certain things and a sort of playfulness around. So this again, well, this was a really phenomenal family. They had 6 children, all under the age of, was it 8, Jan? She just had a 7th. This is the Novogratz family. So they put the boys all in one room, and they lined all the beds up on one wall, which they had 4 boys, and they had twins. And I thought the scale, more than that, I thought the scale of that giant artwork behind them was really great next to these tiny little bodies. And actually, that's a beautiful piece that's made out of toys. That portrait is made out of tiny little toys. This is a really great room. This mural was painted by a really well-trained mural painter who couldn't figure out how to get the clients really wanted something playful, and he couldn't do it at first. He tried to do something playful, and it just kept looking too good, which I don't know if you've ever tried to draw like a kid, but it's actually hard. So, especially if you're a trained artist like this guy. So he worked on it, and the clients kept coming up and saying, you know, it's okay. And finally he started drawing with his feet. And then it worked, and with his left hand. I mean, I guess it wouldn't be quite as hard for me. I think my left hand would be fine. But so he got this really great playful look, and it's all around the room. Over here, he did the pipes become the 11 of a counting up to 12 on the wall that you see there. He did lots of clever things, and I think, you know, it's not for everyone. I think, as you can see here, it sort of dominates, so you can't decorate exactly as you would without it, but it's pretty amazing, so it wouldn't be too hard to live with that, I felt. This is just, I thought, a good example of pattern and color, and, you know, just a really great mix, sunny mix. And, you know, I don't think, it's such a simple thing, but I think people don't, we all know it, all parents know it, bring things low down so that kids can get to them, but I think we don't do it enough. And, you know, kids get to be waist high and you think maybe they don't need that anymore, and I think they really do. So this is a house in Morocco, in Marrakesh, and I just, all around the house, well, in Morocco, you know, they live sort of lower anyway, they eat on the floor. I mean, everything's about sitting on the floor, so it's more natural inclination for them. But I really loved how all around the house there were books on the floor, there were hooks really low. Everything was geared to their kids really accessing everything, which was really inspiring. I brought this because there's so much chalkboard paint that's popular now, and it's really fantastic, and I think it's great. Everyone has it on their fridge and on boxes. You can paint anything. But I think we're sort of. I love this picture because it shows that it actually becomes sort of like a wallpaper, sort of a pattern, and I think it's really quite beautiful in that regard. To not clean it so much. This happens to be a really nice example, but it's not like. I think kids make this kind of art all the time, and if you let them go, it really becomes its own pattern. I think it really brings a lot to the room. Yeah, isn't that nice? This is the home of the clothing designer Eliza Grand, who designs really cute kids' clothes. This is Caleb, who wants to turn his room into a donut. And his parents are artists, and his mom designed that wallpaper in the back, and his dad put up this climbing wall. And I just think it's a really great example of pattern. I mean, the room is tiny. I don't know if you can tell. Well, you can see how small he is. I mean, that's really as big as the room is, maybe just a little bit longer. And they really made the most of it. And this is a play area on top. I think that might be the end of my slides. Yes, okay, so now I just wanted to introduce our next speaker, who is Satchel, a 9-year-old, who we published. His house was designed by Alden Madry, and we published his room because it was so fantastic. And Satchel is wonderfully articulate and was happy to be part of tonight. So it's really important to Cookie. All of the editors speak to kids all the time about what they're doing, and most are parents. I feel like it couldn't be a more fun assignment to include the kid in what I'm doing, so I'm really happy to have Satchel here. Satchel is a 9-year-old living in Brooklyn. He's in 3rd grade at PS 321 in Brooklyn. He's a voracious reader and a tennis player who loves video games and Lego, right? So he's going to talk to you a little bit about some of the rooms, what he thinks about his room. Come on up.
Hello. I'd like to thank Kiera Coffee for inviting me here this evening. My name is Satchel, as she has introduced me. I can introduce myself, but thank you anyway. When my parents combined the two apartments to make our home, we got to design mine and my sister's rooms. The thing I like best about my room is first my bed. It's my favorite place to read. As you can see, there's my bed right there. One unique thing about my room is that it can be private by closing my sliding doors, or it can be public by opening up 2 of the doors. I also have a small door that connects my room with my 4-year-old sister's room. This brings me to one change I would like to make in the design of my room. Instead of a door that swings either way, I would like the door to close shut and preferably lock. There's a ladder in my room which leads to a loft. Actually, the ladder goes to a bridge that crosses the hall and goes to my loft. There are a lot. Maybe I have a picture of the bridge. Nope. No, that's the wrong ladder. Whoops. Here. There are lots of things you can do in my loft. There's a reading light and pillows at one end for quiet reading. You can play up there with friends, throw Nerf balls down, and get up. We have 50 softballs that make great ammunition for unsuspecting people walking down the hall. We throw balls down from over there, here, and here. Whoops. That picture is not very good. Then I like to sneak attack. I also like jumping down from my ladder onto my bed. Mom says not to jump any higher than the 4th rung, a rule which I usually obey. Whoops, sorry, Mom. Another thing I would like to change about my room is the windows between Nora's room and mine. Mom and Dad say it lets in lots of light. I say it lets in my sister's face, which I often see pressed against the window. Well, I think my room is special in a lot of ways. I can hang out with my friends. I've got some great places to store my toys and stuff. About right there. Stuff I collect. And I can climb and jump around. I'm a pretty lucky kid to have a space that was designed just for me. Thanks for listening. Are there any questions or comments? Thank you. You're too kind.
So let me just say I have seen Satchel jump from the 4th rung, and it's totally frightening. It might not look that high, but really, it looks incredible when he goes. So our next speakers are designers Mishi, Hosono and Adam Weintraub. They're the husband and wife team that established Koko Architecture and Design. They worked with Cookie on a show house we did in the summer down in Battery Park City. And their studio was named one of the 10 Faces of the Future by American Institute of Architects, the New York chapter. And their projects for children can be seen throughout New York City, and they include playgrounds, galleries, early childhood centers, as well as residential interiors. And together they teach an advanced urbanism studio at the New York Institute of Technology. So let me just forward this a little bit, and there we go.
We would like to begin by thanking both the Cooper-Hewitt and Cookie magazine for inviting us to present our work this evening. This time I'm not sure if we're going to thank Kiera for the lineup because it's pretty tough to follow Satchel's performance, but we'll do our best. We also need to thank our 4-year-old and 6-year-old daughters for their help in creating several of the images that we're going to share with you. When Kiera first approached us about designing the ultimate modern baby nursery for Cookie magazine's show house, we were a bit taken aback. Not by the assignment of a nursery, but by the fact that there was no client in the traditional sense of the word. In the case of baby nurseries, the client is the parent, even though the room is intended for a new baby. The mixture of anxiety and anticipation, particularly with a first child, can make nursery design something that most architects avoid at all costs. However, the Cookie Show House gave us the opportunity to reflect our approach to design, in particular, design for children. In our presentation, we would like to share with you 4 themes that reflect our design of the Cookie Nursery. We've also included some images from our other children's projects to better illustrate the themes. A balance of the senses. Frequently, designs for children's first bedrooms overemphasize the visual sense at the expense of the less obvious senses. Ironically, a newborn's sense of touch, sound, smell, and taste are often much more developed than their visual abilities. The Cookie Living Show House provided the unusual opportunity to magically step into a page of Cookie magazine. Many of the elements might not be fully appreciated if only seen in a photograph. The sounds of the wooden ball play and the soft felt rug create a rich auditory and tactile experience. We created a play rug we call Leftovers by recycling the industrial offcuts from an automotive felt supplier in Detroit. The resulting rug has the softness of a deep pile while also giving kids a new surface to explore. Our custom ball pit also incorporates wooden eggs for an impromptu treasure hunt. We've experimented with Please Touch walls at the Children Aid Early Childhood Center in Greenwich Village. The senses of smell and taste are also very strong in the world of the child. Time and budget constraints didn't allow for a scratch and sniff wallpaper in the Cookie Nursery, but I might add there's a wonderful cherry scratch and sniff wallpaper upstairs. But the effects of smell can still be experienced through fruits and flowers. Sound is another underappreciated element in children's spaces. Whether it is an electronic solution, as in this ideal CD player that you can turn on and off by pulling the string, or in a more acoustical solution, as seen in the talking tubes that we used in the West Village Nursery School playground. Movement and balance are also important senses to be developed by young children. The swinging bassinet and hollow log bench provide the child with new challenging ways to move through the space. Now Mishi is going to discuss the next 2 themes, color and sustainability.
Color is one of the most important design tools that we use in our office. We have discovered that there's a great fear of color. It is a bit intimidating when you are faced with a blank wall to work with. Painting a piece of architecture seems so permanent that you feel like you're doing something wrong. With an unlimited palette to choose from, where does one start? When it comes to working on the color scheme of a nursery, parents have a preconception of what that room should look like. What society thinks of a boy color versus a girl color, they think it should feel happy, bright, and rainbow-like. Somehow picking an unusual color will affect the well-being of the child for life. They assume ultramarine blue for a little boy, rose petal pink for a little girl, and perhaps a lemon yellow if you're still waiting to know, just to be safe. We once had a pregnant client that gave us their doctor's name and number. We were instructed to call and find out the gender while keeping it secret from the parents. The intention was for us to paint the room as soon as they left for the hospital. We like to dream about colors that cannot be named, what we call those in-between shades. The paint industry spends a great deal of time trying to come up with clever names for each color. We think that once you name a color, something is lost. The color needs to speak for itself. We learn a lot from our 4-year-old who makes beautiful color fields on a piece of paper. There is no preconception that a girl should like red or pink or orange. Her favorite color is, in fact, industrial gray. Picasso said, "Every child is an artist, and the problem is how to remain an artist once you grow up." We live our whole lives trying to undo the preconceptions of gender-specific colors that we have learned through society. A week before Cookie Show House was scheduled to open, the crib company where we had ordered the custom color called to say that they could not deliver the gray crib on time. But how about the same crib in white? In our minds, it had to be the warm gray crib against the mustard, and if the crib changed, the whole wall had to be repainted. Fortunately, another company came through with perfect shade of gray. Thinking about color should not be limited to just the paint of the walls, but should include all the elements that make up the child's room. The objects, the textiles, the furniture. One shouldn't be afraid to combine unusual colors next to each other and see what happens. And perhaps we could come up with fresh ideas that our daughters teach us every day. Reimagine, reuse, recycle. We are fascinated by our own children's abilities of invention. If in our design work we feel that the imaginative play can also provide us with an approach to sustainability. By creating open, modern interiors, children are able to interpret and reinterpret each space on their own terms. Here is the interior of the Cheese Tower in the Imaginasium, a large indoor space that we designed for the Children's Aid Society Early Childhood Center. We always try to include some version of what we call the Alice door that gives the child their own entry into another world, which became their creation. Here it is used as a secret entrance to the Cheese Tower of the Imaginasium from the back. At the Cookie Show House, we use such a door to transform a closet into a hidden playhouse. Just as a toddler can turn a chair into a fire truck, we look for ways of reinterpreting materials. In the Cookie Nursery, recycled plastic jugs became water buffaloes. Birch branches act both as structures for shelves and a magical forest for dolls. And in this case, plastic recycled bag chickens. And, vintage wood blocks become a display wall or an abstract vertical dollhouse. And clear plastic globes are transformed into educational light fixtures. And this is a bedroom for a boy on the Upper West Side. We hope that our interiors not only spark the imagination of the child, but as importantly, we reinvigorate the imagination of the parent. Next, Adam will speak about graffiti.
Or as I like to call it, please write on the walls. One of the reasons that we really enjoy designing for children is the freedom that it gives us within the serious world of architecture. All too often, there's a fear of experimentation. But somehow, if the project's for kids, it's okay to be a bit off. We take every opportunity we have to draw on the walls. This graffiti can take the form of a line drawing, as in this is the interior of the closet for the cookie nursery. Or for the more timid, we often use clothespins to encourage an impromptu gallery. This was used to animate a dreary hallway in the show house. In the cookie nursery, we fabricated custom wallpaper to transform a serious bath into a sea of rubber duckies. In this downtown playground, we are able to make full-scale silhouettes to transform a dull courtyard facade into a parade of animals. The graffiti is not limited to the walls, and in the same space, we used super graphics on the ground surface to provide another avenue for play. In the Early Childhood Center, we pushed the wall and floor graphics to the extreme. Here it is combining the wall graphics with the Please Touch wall. The artificial landscape is the ultimate escape for toddlers in Greenwich Village. Here you can see the Imaginasium with the exterior of the Cheese Tower, our cloud wallpaper, and custom safety carpeting. A more restrained play space was created as a complement to a Scandinavian art gallery more north, located in Tribeca. Here we combine the wall graffiti with the Alice doors, making a graphic wall that can also be inhabited by the children. Initially, half of these tree closets were to be used as storage. Once the clients saw them complete, they agreed to use them all as play spaces for the children. Initially, the clients considered bringing in a traditional mural painter to decorate the walls of the play space with classical Swedish fairy tales. We felt strongly that a mural is a closed piece of artwork that limits the participation of a child. We proposed line drawings done by our studio, which maintain the modern feel of the gallery while also encouraging young artists to make their own drawings. The wall writing becomes a complement for the tea party. In closing, please don't be afraid to write on your walls.
By the way, tonight, from a couple of the designers, you're seeing previews of some things that have not appeared in Cookie, but that will. So you're getting a little special preview. I'm going to introduce now Jennifer Ward, who is the creative director and imagination agent, which sounds very exciting, behind Minor Details, a design firm in New York City that specializes in children's interiors.
Hello, thank you. I'm just very thankful to Cookie Magazine and Cooper-Hewitt for having me, so thank you. Minor Details. I do interior architecture for children's spaces, residential, recreational, and commercial. And one of the staples behind my philosophy is to spark imagination and to create space that's not forced, but that is a gateway to creativity. When I was asked to do the Cookie Living House, it posed a lot of interesting challenges. The main one being designing a space for an imaginary client with an imaginary house with an imaginary budget, and how to make that happen. And with every new client that I have, I always ask for one source of inspiration. It could be the pattern of a tie, it could be the line of a chair, it could be a painting, it could be a tear sheet, what have you. So I had to provide that for this space. And so I took the pages of a book that actually an author upstairs, Oliver Jeffers, is in the reading area, so I'd suggest checking him out. And so, we'll move on. So with this room, I wanted to basically challenge myself to kind of test the old rules of design. And to me, the 3 points that I wanted to kind of hit on were color, theme, and look but don't touch. And that old ideal that you know, you can have nice things or you can have vintage things, but you can't necessarily play with them. And you know, with color, you have the standard blue for boy, pink for girl, and theme usually is boys are cowboys and Indians and girls are princesses and rainbows. So I really wanted to test those theories and see if there was a way to modernize it. The first one was the theme idea, the idea of a theme. So I took the pages of the book, which it's about a boy who eats books. And he eats and eats and eats and eats them, and eventually he gets sick, and he realizes that if he just reads the pages of the book, that he'll actually retain a lot more of the knowledge. So here I wanted to create a lot of spaces that could hold a lot of books, nooks and crannies, you know, have the globe be a part of it, like bring a lot of vintage elements into it. And I actually took pages, where's the thing? Pages of the book and had them blown up and mounted to serve as an art piece in the space. And so this is kind of how I did theme to the room without actually throwing the theme in your face. So then on to color. I wanted to really do a gender-neutral space where if you were to walk into the space, you wouldn't necessarily know if it was a girl's room or if it was a boy's room. And instead of the pink, I pulled orange. Instead of blue, I pulled a turquoise, and kind of really wanted to create a gender-neutral palette. And third is on the look but don't touch element. As you can see, I brought in a vintage typewriter here that works, that is encouraged to be used to have fun and also serve as a form of education as well. So it's very fun for kids. That actually was one of the highlights, I think, of this particular room during the show house. All the kids seemed to really enjoy that, so that was fun. And so this is kind of how I took that challenge, and I feel like I achieved it pretty well. Another thing about the space, which I always wanted to do in every space that I do for kids, is allow them to have ownership of the space. And here I took an upright bookcase and turned it on its side, put the legs on it, and you can't really see it in this picture, but along this side there's a secret cubby where a journal or a private thing could be stashed. I put the hammock here so to create dead space, which was where this closet door opened, but there's a hook where a kid could relax and be kind of taken away in his own space. So there's that. Again, it's another point of mine to really mold curiosity into exploration with any space. So onto another space that I designed. This is a play space for a 130-unit co-op. And the clients basically told me that their main objective was to design a space for a wide age range of children and to also have another area that the parents or caregivers could, necessarily sit and enjoy each other's time, but let the kids kind of feel like that they're a little bit separated from the two. So I took this space and with this idea of creating a vibrant, soft, stimulating, and flexible environment, but also being very pleasing and calm with the color choices. So to provide a nice, calm space. A side note, I'm taking a nutrition course, and this woman has a 6-year-old. She was asking the nutritionist, She's like, we have such a hard time at mealtime. It's always a struggle, it's a compromise, and we've gotten rules, we've done star calendars and rewards and charts and all these things, and it just nothing seems to work. And the nutritionist said, well, if you had a family member that invited you to dinner all the time and it was a struggle and it was, a compromise and negotiation, you'd get kind of bored and you wouldn't really want to go anymore. And I think that kind of holds true with the rules that are applied to design, especially for kid spaces. We can provide the box, but it's up to them to make that box into a rocket ship, to actively encourage children to make their mark on their own spaces so that they can thrive. And one of my favorite designers that is based in Reggio, Italy, states that children have the right to beauty. And so if we reinvent the rules of design and apply a fresh aesthetic, then we can achieve the ideal space for the modern child. So that's it. Thank you.
So just a second before I introduce Jan, I just want to say it's such a pleasure to have these designers here. It's really fun for me. And, being an editor is very different than being a designer. I often design for real homes, and it crosses over a little bit. But, I'm so proud of myself when I have a fake client like you did for the show house, which I have all the time. And I get an Angela Davis poster, and then I'm like, yeah, that seems real. But so it's nice to have the other side where you're working with clients all the time and you have a different experience. So it's a pleasure to hear all that. And we'll hear that from Jan, too. So Jan Eleni. In 2005, Jan Eleni developed an interior decorating company that focuses on children and their personal spaces. Jan aims to create a child's own place through collaboration. She had a vintage store in Manhattan in the 90s, which many of you may have seen and gone to, and she worked as creative project manager for ABC Carpet and Home. Her work has been featured in Cookie, Domino, Living Etc., Milk, and Milk Decor. She has just finished working on a brownstone in Manhattan and is currently working on a loft in Williamsburg. Please welcome Jan.
So good evening, everyone. My name is Jan, and I would like to start by saying how fortunate I am to have found my passion in what I do, and that is designing children's spaces. My inspiration comes from a result of my travels and seeing how different cultures, especially the European, deal with children and their spaces. There's a certain freedom and flow and carefree being which I try to incorporate in my work. And my core belief is to create a space where children can see themselves, where they can flourish, and a place that is real to them. I respect a child's choice, and I try to include them in the decision-making process as much as possible. While their choice may not be perfect, not perfect is okay, especially for a child's space. I work closely with both the parents and the children to create a balanced environment, giving them the tools that inspire, nurture, and encourage. Like growth spurts, all rooms need space to grow and time to evolve. We need to allow the room to be who the child is, and this is really an important part of my belief. A room should hold their interests, their passions, their collections, and their treasures. Their rooms are an expression of themselves, and I believe and I know it can create harmony. We don't need to indulge them in excess, but we shouldn't be blind to what can make them very happy. We can do this by making simple changes and additions, be logical and be creative. Involve them in the process of doing this. It can be quite fun for everyone. For this project, for Cookie, I had to create 3 special rooms of special interest. This is the first one of being for a train lover. I worked with a Boston architectural designer, Matthew Fickett, here. And here we see a train-inspired room for a young boy. And this is a versatile room, which is a very important aspect for a children's room. It is mobile and open. I'm sorry, I keep going out of the mic. And one that they can grow with, which is a very important part of a child's room. An ever-changing room that is not screaming train motif, but in subtle ways nurtures their penchant. The ledge around the room, which is right around, going all around, is a stable ledge and a play area for their trains and their tracks and their accessories. If at a later time they no longer have the desire to have their train sets, it could easily be used for toys and books. In this next room, this is a nesting room, which is one of my very dear favorites. It's for a young girl, and here I used a lot of various lightings to give the room its warmth and its glow, and a slight hint of fancy. Lighting is very important in a child's space, so don't be afraid to use different lights. Kids really do love them. Lighting can be an inexpensive way to create just the right atmosphere. For this special project, we used Molo design dividers. These are paper dividers, and we put lights around the bottom to create a glow. And these can be moved and can be used to create nooks and crannies without feeling dark and scary for the child. This room is playful and enchanting and a complete hideaway, and all the items are one that she can grow with. So in conclusion, I don't have the slide for the active room, but in conclusion, I'd like to thank Cookie Magazine for being such a wonderful platform and inspiration to us all. Okay, thank you so much.